Hey everyone, Alex here from Japanese Masters, and today we're going to cover Minna no Nihongo Lesson 4, Part 2, that is verb mas, verb mashita, verb masen, verb masen deshita. Okay, let's go and dive right on into this. Okay, as you can see here, I just put verb mas form, because that is really what we're covering today. Those four things I just listed a second ago, all of that combined is known as the mas form, or the polite form in Japanese. And it's the way of conjugating the verb in Japanese. If you've ever studied a language before, like Spanish or any of the other like Latin languages, you know that conjugation is incredibly important in those languages. And usually in those languages, you would conjugate the verb based on who the subject is. If you haven't studied another language, then when I say conjugate a verb, I mean the difference between I run, you run, he, she runs, we run, they run, stuff like that. In English, we're kind of like Japanese, actually. If you notice, run only changes with the he and she, where it becomes runs. Japanese is very similar to that, where there's not very much difference based on the subject. But we'll go over that in a second. If you also notice, there's no really direct translation because the verb mas form by itself doesn't really mean anything. It just means the verb that's attached to it, but you're giving it a tense, future, past, something like that. Let's go ahead and break this down a little bit, and hopefully you'll understand it after that. Okay, so here are the four that you've probably seen in the section. It is mas, masin, mashita, and masin deshita. And let's go ahead and go through each of these and know exactly what they mean. So, mas and masin, they are what is known as the non-past. They are not known as the future. They're not known as the present. They're known as the non-past. Why? Because they can be either. They can be the present and they can be the future. When referring to the present, it's not like I'm running, like, I'm running right now. That is not what it means by the present. That's actually considered present progressive, and that's like an ing verb in English where you'd say I'm running, I'm jumping, something like that. That is not this form. This present tense is like a habitual present tense. So if someone asks, do you have a job, you'd be like, yeah, I work, or yeah, I'm working. Both of those are habitual, and in that case, you can use the mas form. The mas form is very, very open to interpretation. Like, you can kind of use it whenever. It's not in the past, and people will generally understand what you're talking about. Then masin is going to be the negative form of that, so that's when you'd say, I don't work, I don't run, stuff like that. When you're talking about a habitual thing, or in the present, I am not going to run, I am not going to work, something like that. Now let's move into the past, because like I said, in Japanese, we have the non-past and the past, the only two different types of tenses. So now we're going to go into the past, and in the past, mas becomes mashita, which means I did run, I did eat, something like that. This is very much like the English past tense. It's just anything that's not present or future is the past. And then when you want to say that you didn't eat or you didn't run, then you use masen deshita. That is the past negative, the past tense saying that whatever the verb is didn't happen. Now that we have these four basics down, here's kind of where the book and I are going to diverge a little bit. In the book, they like to just say that you're going to see the verbs in mas form and just know how to recognize them. However, I actually want to teach you how to actually create these from the dictionary form. The dictionary form of a verb literally means the dictionary form of the verb. If you go and look it up in a dictionary, it'll be what the verb is written like there. And then from knowing what a verb's dictionary form is, you can easily create its mas form. Okay, let's go and figure out how to turn a dictionary form verb into a mas form verb. The first thing we need to go over is that there are three different types of groups in Japanese for verbs. So we have our group 1 verbs, our group 2 verbs, and our group 3 verbs. They are also known as u verbs, ru verbs, and irregular verbs. So this might look a little bit confusing at first, but don't worry, it's not difficult. Let's just take it one section at a time, all right? So, group 1 verbs. These are what is known as u verbs. And what do I mean by u verbs? I mean that the sound at the end of the verb, when it's in dictionary form, always ends in u. Now, I'm not talking about like this one, ku. That is considered an u because it has k and u. The u at the very end of the k sound is what we're talking about when we talk about u verbs. So, for example, if the verb ends in u, ku, mu, bu, gu, or nu, then it is an u verb. An example right here is kau. Kau ends in u, so therefore it is an u verb, and will take all the rules of an u verb. Now, Ru is also considered something that was going to make it a group 1 verb, but as you can see over here in group 2, ru is the only thing to determine whether it's a group 2 verb or not. So we're going to go over that in a second. When you have a verb that ends in ru, whether it's group 1 or group 2. But for now, let's just stay with group 1 for a second. So you have a group 1 verb like this. You have kau. How are you going to change it into this form right here? Well, what you have to do is you have to take all of these sounds and change them into their corresponding e sound. So, for example, you change ku into ki. The same k sound, that same k sound, is going to stay there, but you're going to change the last one, the u part of the verb, into an e. So that makes u to e, ku to ki, mu to mi, bu to bi, gu to gi, nu to ni, and then if you have a ru verb that is considered in the u group, then it becomes ri. So if we were to take this verb right here, kau means to buy in Japanese, and we wanted to change it into mas form. We would change the last one right here, u, the last sound, and we change it into an e, so it'd be kai, and then we just attach one of these to it. So if we wanted to say that I will buy it, we would change this from kau to kaimasu. So you change it from kau to kai, then you add mas onto the end of it. It's as simple as that. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the group 2 verbs. Every single group 2 verb ends in ru. If it doesn't end in ru, it is 100% an u verb. However, not all verbs that end in ru are going to be group 2 verbs. Yet again, we'll go over that in a second, but if we have determined it is a group 2 verb, how are we going to get it into mas form? Okay, so we have the verb right here, taberu. That is indeed a group 2 verb. So if we want to change this into mas form, what we're going to do is we're going to take taberu, and as you can see here, we just remove the ru. So taberu just becomes tabe. And then we go ahead and slap one of these 4 on here. So if you want to say I didn't eat, then it would be tabe masen deshita. You say I'm going to eat, tabe mas. Say I'm not going to eat, tabe masen. It's as simple as that. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the last set of verbs. That is our group 3 verbs, our irregular verbs. There are only 2 of them, suru and kuru. Suru means to do, kuru means to come. The reason that these are known as irregular verbs is because once we get into more complex conjugations, like potential form and stuff like that, these are different almost every single time. They don't follow the group 1 and group 2 rules. They're special. So for this one, for the mas form, how are we going to create them? So it's really simple. Suru just becomes shi, kuru just becomes ki. And then you attach any of these 4 forms to either shi or ki. So for example, to say that I'm going to do it, you would say shimasu. To say that I am going to come, you'd say kimasu, something like that. Now over here, all this is just the kanji for kuru. Most of the times, it's actually written with the kanji, so I just wrote it here so that you will be able to recognize it. If you see this just means kuru. Okay, now let's go into the part that I was talking about. Let's talk about this right here. How do we determine if a verb ends in ru, whether it is group 1 or group 2? That is with this right here. Okay, so if the sound before the ru, this sound right here, the be, is going to be how we determine whether it is group 1 or group 2. The sound before the ru, that is going to be the determining sound. So if this sound right here were either an a, an u, or an o, and that is the same thing as here, it's the very, very last sound. So if it was ka, so if there's ka before it, that is technically an a sound before the ru. If it's any of these 3 sounds, then it is 100% a group 1 verb. If it is any of these 2 sounds, e or a, there is a good chance it is a group 2 verb. However, that rule is not 100%. That rule is just a 90% of the time is going to be group 2, but sometimes it's not. An example of a time when it's not is the verb hashiru. Hashiru means to run. So based on our current rules, because we have the sound right here, the ru, we look before it and we have shi, we would think, oh, okay, that falls into this category here, it's going to be a group 2 verb. But if you notice by the conjugation, it is not hashimasu, it is hashirimasu, which means it is group 1. These irregular verbs you're just going to have to memorize as you come across them. There are only a couple, if I remember. There's not like a whole ton of them, but you are definitely going to see them and have to tell the difference between them. And that is the basics of mas form. I'll just go over it one more time really quickly just to make sure you get it. So we have our 4 tenses up here: positive, negative, past, and non-past. If you want to be Non-past and positive, you use this. If you want to be past and negative, you use this column. Just follow the columns of the table. If we want to create a mas form verb, you have to determine whether it's in group 1, 2, or 3. Group 1 verbs are considered u verbs, and that means that the last sound of the verb is going to end in u. So it's going to be any of these. A group 2 verb, all group 2 verbs end in ru. Group 3 verbs just consist of suru and kuru. For group 1 verbs, if your verb is group 1, you're going to change that u sound into an e sound. So ku will become ki, for example. If it is a group 2 verb, you're just going to remove the ru and then put on one of these forms. And for group 1, you're going to change it to the e and then put on one of those forms. And then for the irregulars, you just have to memorize it. Suru becomes shi, kuru becomes ki, and then you just put on one of these forms. And if you want to determine whether it is a group 1 or group 2 verb, if it ends in ru, then you use this. If it ends in a, u, or o before the ru, then it is 100% a group 1 verb. If it ends in e or a before the ru, then there is a really good chance it is a group 2 verb. But, as we can see with hashiru, it's not always the case. Because hashiru is actually a group 1 verb, even though it looks to follow all the rules for something that would be a group 2 verb or a ru verb. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let's go ahead and go through a couple of examples to really cement this in your brain. Okay, our first example is, yeah, I'm gonna buy it. Hai, sore o kaimasu. Okay, the first thing we should notice here is this is the same verb that we were using here, kau. It's right here again. And except I decided to conjugate it in the polite form. So we have kau. This would originally be an u sound right here. How are we going to turn it into polite form? Well, we change the u into an e sound, and then we add whatever ending we want. Because we want to say we are going to buy it, we're going to put mas at the end of it. So that becomes kaimasu. And then, of course, we have our hai, which just means yes. And then sore, which is just a pronoun like it or something like that. So I'm going to buy it. Or I'm going to buy that would be another translation. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next example. The next example is, I went to school yesterday. Kino gakko ni ikimashita. Okay, so here we have our verb ikimashita. Now, the dictionary form of this is iku. It is the ku sound, ku. So in order to turn it into the mas form, we are going to make it ki, iki, and then we put whatever the ending we want on it. And because we want to put it in a past tense, went, we are going to put mashita, which, remember, is our positive, and in the past is mashita. Okay, and if you need to look up any of these verbs, you can look them up on sites like gshow.org is a good one to look it up. You could look up to go, and it would give you the verb in dictionary form. Or even Google Translate is not great for sentences. I would not use it for sentences, but individual words you can look up. Like you could probably look up to go, and it would most likely give you the correct answer. It might give you ikimasu. I'm not sure if it would give you dictionary or polite form. Then we have gakko here, which just means school, and then kino, which is yesterday. Which, if you remember the last lesson, I talked about that if the time is relative to the current time right now, you don't need to add the ni particle. Yesterday is relative to today, as yesterday is always changing, so we don't need to add ni after it. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next example. The next example is, I don't work here. Koko de hatarakimasen. This is another example of the group 1 verbs. I wanted to put a whole bunch of group 1 verbs in here so that you really know how to conjugate these into the correct Japanese tense. Okay, so the dictionary form of this verb is hataraku, as you can probably tell. So that means that we need to change ku into ki, hatarakimasen, and that's how you create this form. And then koko just means here. And there's another thing that you should notice. Even though I used I, the subject does not matter with conjugation in Japanese. This could be you don't work here. It could be we don't work here. It could be they don't work here. It could be anything, and this will always be hatarakimasen. If you've studied Spanish or anything like that, then you know that every single verb usually has a conjugation for the subject. So there's a different conjugation for I speak in Italian than there is for you speak, because the subject determines how it is actually conjugated. That doesn't. English is similar, as in I run or he runs. Depending on the subject, it changes a little bit. Japanese, it is the exact same no matter what the subject is. This could be any subject over here, and this will always be hatarakimasen. Remember that. It actually makes things a whole lot easier. Okay, let's go ahead and go into the final example. The final example is I did not eat breakfast. The first thing we're going to look at is, of course, the verb. This time, we do not have a group 1 verb. This time, we have a group 2 verb, which is, again, the same thing as I used the example. Taberu. So how do we turn taberu into the mas form? Well, because this is a group 2 verb, all we do is we take the ru that's here in the dictionary form, taberu, completely remove the ru, and then add the mas form that we want to put on there. So in order to say I did not, then you would put masen deshita. As we can see back here, that is the negative past, is masen deshita. So that would become I did not eat. Now, if you notice, this is really, really, really long. There's reasons that you only use this when you're talking politely because it's just a really long sentence. There's much shorter ways to say this when you want to be less polite, but we'll go over that in a later lesson. And then asagohan is the Japanese word for breakfast. And that is the end of today's lesson. I really hope this made sense. The mas form is one of those fundamental things you have to get down if you're going to learn Japanese. And I hope that you have a good foundation now about how to use mas in all those forms. Because until you get to higher levels of Japanese, you're going to be using this form almost exclusively. Once you get to the plain form, the one you use with friends, then things get a little more complicated. But most of the stuff you're going to see right now is going to be in the mas form to keep it easy for you. So make sure you get this form down. Make sure to look over this table here, understand everything about it. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to put them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. Just a heads up, I relaunched my site, Shogunate Japanese, where I am going to take all of these Minna no Nihongo courses and I'm going to put it in an actual course format with the video that I'm creating right now, as well as a whole article about it, examples, stuff like that, so that you can progress through the book in an actual linear format that's really, really easily formatted with quizzes and stuff like that, so that you really understand Minna no Nihongo. So if you want to check that out, check it out in the link below. You can also pick up one of these books to, follow along or anything like that if you don't have the book already. Yeah, so if you want to check out the site, the description will be in the link below. I should have the current lesson that this is in the description, as well as the overall Minna no Nihongo course, and just a direct link to my site. So check that out if you want to really get involved in Minna no Nihongo and really learn all this material really well. Okay. Until next time, guys, keep studying Japanese. All right, everyone. See ya.